Welcome back to the Great Detour. Today, I'm joined by Ray Martin, an entrepreneur and award-winning business leader whose life, from the outside, looked like the definition of success. But when his marriage ended, his father passed, and he stepped away from the company he created, all around the same time, by the way, everything he had built his identity around suddenly fell away. What began as a 6-month sabbatical to recover and reflect turned into a 14-year journey across 28 countries and 4 continents. Along the way, Ray rebuilt his life from the inside out, ultimately becoming a coach, mentor, mindfulness teacher, and the author of Life Without a Tie, a book that resonated deeply with me as I'm on my own journey of self-discovery. In this conversation, we explore identity, letting go, intuition, which we know is one of my favorite topics, and what it really means to live a life that's aligned with who you truly are, not who the world expects you to be. It's a really great conversation, and I'm excited for you to hear it, so let's dive in. Welcome to the Great Detour. I'm Jess, your host. In this podcast, we talk about life's unplanned paths, those experiences that challenge and transform us in ways we never expected. Through honest conversations, my guests and I share inspiring stories and practical advice to help you navigate your own journey. I hope these stories inspire you to trust your path, embrace change with resilience, and step into your most authentic, empowered self. Ray Martin, welcome to the Great Detour.
Thank you so much. I've been really looking forward to talking with you.
Oh, thank you. I am so excited for this conversation. One of my favorite things to explore is how we attach our identities to different external entities, be it a career, a spouse, a title, and then what happens when we remove those things or we lose those things?
Yeah.
Who are we underneath them all? And I think you, at the heart of your story, is this powerful deconstruction of this identity that you built for yourself over the years. And in that undoing, it really propelled you into a life of authenticity and alignment. And man, just such good stuff. As I was reading your book, there were so many moments of resonance for me and so many insightful things. So I've been so excited just to dig in and talk more about it today. So
Great.
I would love to start off by really having you share a little bit of your story. You know, you embarked on what you thought was going to be a 6-month sabbatical that turned out to be 14 years and 28 countries, 4 continents. So I would love for you to take us back to that time in your life right before you embarked on this sabbatical.
Yeah.
What did your life look like? What was going on? And what prompted you to step away from life as you knew it and take this break?
Yeah, I can do that. I'll try to be brief because I know we've got limited time. You know, I think when I was a child growing up, really the only guidance I had about life was to be happy. You need to have a successful job, a house, a wife. You know, these are the things you need in order to be happy. I grew up in the 60s and that's the kind of guidance I received from parents and their friends. So I didn't even question that. I just accepted that as being true and just got on with doing it. So by the time I got to age 40-ish, I was married, and the person I was married to had a similar vision for creating a company that I did, because we always wanted to create our own business so we could be independent financially. And we started a management consulting firm together, and we had some really brilliant ideas on how to do that because we'd worked in a previous firm as employees and we could see all the things that didn't work. So we could really see how to innovate that service, and we did it really, really well as a team, and we recruited a great team of consultants to the business. So I ran a company of about 20 people, and in 2002 I was the lucky recipient of the Business Leader of the Year award in England. And so at that point I sort of felt like I'd achieved and ticked all the boxes of the life that was expected of me by others. And I say this particular wording because it came from a book that I read called The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying by Bronnie Ware, which has become a very famous book. And she works in a hospice with people in the last days of their life. And she says, I asked them all the same question: what do you most regret about your life? And she said, they all say the same 5 things. Doesn't matter what they did, whether they were a multimillionaire or a janitor, they all say the same 5 things. So what do you think the number one regret would be that people would say?
Well, I know what it is because I read your book.
Okay. Okay, right. Okay. So to put the readers out of their suspense, the number one regret is I wish I'd lived my life true to myself and not the life
Exactly.
that others expected of me. Now, when I read this book, it was at a time when my wife and business partner at the time had very suddenly and abruptly decided she wanted to be out of the marriage and out of the company. And honestly, at that point, I sort of felt my life was over. It was like being stabbed in the stomach. It was horrible, horrible. And if that wasn't bad enough, at the same time, my father got very, very ill and he died shortly afterwards. And so within 3 or 4 months, my life went from being normal, like working, married, living that blueprint that I described, to being me standing in a bomb crater of destruction and just looking around, full circle, going, my dad's gone, my marriage is gone, I'm out of my company, and I have to leave my home that I've got. And I'm just out of it. I'm just starting again from zero. And I felt really broken. I just felt really broken. For about a year, I was quite depressed. This was in 2004. And then friends have rallied around and put their arms around my shoulder and talked to me and said, why don't you take a 6-month sabbatical? I think it'd be a good idea. I didn't have children, so that made that choice easier. And so that's what got me to start the thinking.
Yeah.
And I also, as you know from the story in the book, I got invited to go and look after a friend in Australia who had cancer. And that led to me having this extraordinary invitation to act in a play in Australia, which I never would have dreamt in a million years would I'd ever be something I'd try and do. But I just happened to be there and I happened to audition and I got offered the leading role in this play. And I had this feeling that somehow God wanted me to do this. It was just too coincidental and extraordinary with everything that was going on. I thought, this is a doorway I need to go through without knowing what's on the other side. If I don't go through it, I'm never going to discover what's next in my life. And I was broken and I was looking for the next thing. So I did this play in Australia, and then I had this realization that Ray the businessman was a character like the character I'd been playing in the play. And it never occurred to me to think like that until that moment. I'd never seen myself as a character in a story. I just thought that me and Ray the businessman were the same. That's who I was. It's like I was literally welded to my character as if it was really me. And those insights were extremely powerful when they came. And I saw that I could, like any good script writer or film director, I could change the character or write the character out or end the series, which is what I decided to do, go on sabbatical. And after 6 months, when I did my first Vipassana retreat, 10 days of silent meditation with the Buddhist monks, I knew that this had touched me deeply and gave me a deep, deep level of awareness I never had before. I suddenly realized what being mindful really meant. And I understood why human beings suffer, which I never really fully understood until I did that Vipassana. And I understood that suffering is a part of life, and it comes from the thinking that we have wired into our brain that is always wanting to fill a gap that we experience, where you experience this belief we're not enough, we're never enough, we're not rich enough, wise enough, smart enough, powerful enough. We all labor under this delusional thinking that we're not enough. And to fill that gap, we do lots of different things. We have addictions, we consume stuff, we buy stuff, we go shopping, we have relationships we shouldn't have, things like that. And I never really understood any of this. And it just changed my outlook on life completely, so much so that once I'd had that first insight, I wasn't ready to return to the UK just yet. I decided to stay on a bit longer. Then I had this idea to do a fundraiser for an elephant sanctuary and an orphanage in Nepal. So I then committed 2 years to running the New York Marathon and raising $15,000, which I did. And then I did another one, and then it kept snowballing. It got out of control, Jess. I ended up 14 years later coming back to the UK, but it was totally being designed as I was going. I had no written down plan for it.
So much good stuff there, Ray. There's a lot that I want to unpack. And I just think how brave it is and how much courage it must have taken to, because you remind me of myself a little bit in that you seem like the type of person that likes a plan and likes to have control. And
I did when I was a CEO. Yeah.
Exactly. So you have this identity as this CEO, this, businessman of the year.
Yeah.
You step away from that and then you embark on this journey where there's so much uncertainty, and you really leaned into that uncertainty. And what was that like for you in the beginning? Was there a lot of resistance? Was it like,
Oh,
how did
huge.
it feel to step into where like you didn't know what
Yeah.
the next immediate step was?
Extremely scary is how I'd summarize it. I was really uncomfortable in the first 6 to 12 months, really uncomfortable. And it wasn't until I did the Vipassana in month 6 of the first year. And it wasn't really until that moment I started to calm down. I started to get into my physical body and breathe and just be calm. And because I had this ability to then observe my thinking from a distance. And before then, I was just perpetually trapped in my thinking at night, them going around the same thoughts every night. And I couldn't sleep and it was horrible.
I know the feeling.
And and so it was really uncomfortable. And then I thought to myself, okay, so I prepared myself logistically for this journey. I minimized my stuff in England. I sold my house. I packed everything away. I re-engineered my finances so I had enough money to support my trip without needing to get a job for a while. So I did everything on the practical level to prepare, but I hadn't done any psychological preparation for how I would feel not having any routines, not having any goals or targets, not having any obligations, not feeling part of any team or community, being adrift. I hadn't prepared psychologically for any of that. And so what I did after I did the Vipassana, I realized I needed something. I wasn't quite sure what, but I was feeling quite creative. So I got a piece of paper and I wrote down what would be 10 guiding principles that I could apply to myself. I'll make them up, but what would they be that would help me stay psychologically safe and feel secure and feel like I've got control when I go a bit bonkers?
Mm-hmm.
And I came and penned these 10 guiding principles, which you've seen in the book, no doubt. So I'm happy to talk about one or any of those. But
yeah, I love it. There's your business side.
Yeah,
you can take the man
exactly.
take the CEO out of the business. But no, I think that's so smart to kind of give yourself a little bit of safety, because it is quite daunting to, exit this place of security and go into the unknown. So I think it's so smart. And yeah, I'd love to hear a little bit about maybe one or two of those principles that were most important to you during those initial stages of uncertainty.
Well, as everyone has been listening will know, I left feeling broken. I was regarded myself as a failure. I screwed up a marriage. I was not the great successful guy that everyone in the papers thought I was. I managed to sort of wreck my life a bit. And so I had a lot of guilt and shame and stuff like that. So I talked to myself in a very critical way. If you could have a tape recorder of the conversations that went on in my head, if that had been me with a real housemate or flatmate and they spoke to me like that, I'd have kicked them out in a day. I wouldn't have tolerated someone living around me talking to me like that.
I love that you said that, because that's something I'm actively working on now, because I think I'm the same way. I think so many of us are the same way, where we're so critical of ourselves, but we would never speak that way to a friend. So I always try to reframe it when I'm getting in that cycle. Is if your friend came to you with this situation, is this how you would talk to them? And then I'm like, oh no, I wouldn't. And so I try to speak to myself like I would speak to a friend. So I love that you just highlighted that.
So number one of my 10 guiding principles was self-acceptance. Mm. I decided that I would, whenever I found myself thinking like that, I would immediately stop, take a couple of breaths and tell myself, I am improving. I'm on a learning journey. I am on the way to mastery of life. I'm not there yet. And I love myself and accept myself and accept that I'm in a journey of learning and improving. And I would give myself a kind of stroke and say, right, next thing. And I had it to fall back on for when I got locked into that kind of thinking and I couldn't stop it. I could actually, it's like setting a reset button on your phone or something. It was like a phone app. I was able to press it and it would stop for a while and then it would come back and then I'd stop it again. But over time, it got less and less like that. Yes, that's one example. And another one was non-attachment. Because when you're a businessman and you're running a company, your goals and targets are all clearly laid out. You're focused on those things and you just get on and achieve those things. But I had no focus like that. And I didn't want to put any pressure on myself as I did with the businessman. If I went somewhere or went into an experience, I'd only be happy if it turned out a certain way, because that's putting pressure. Like if I met someone who I thought I could form a relationship with. I wanted to be completely unattached to whatever the outcome was and just follow the truth of what felt authentic. So I decided to be not attached and run my life a bit more as an experiment and gather data to say, what was the outcome there? What did I learn from it? Whether it was positive or negative, and whatever I learned, what could I usefully use or review for if it happens again that I could do it differently? How can this help me improve on this journey? So non-attachment was another principle. And then another one was like frugality, modesty, because I had a limited amount of money. I'm very lucky. I had good income when I was a businessman, so I had some savings I was living off. But I wanted to make it stretch as far as possible. So I committed to only buying what I really, really needed. And I chose to stay in accommodations that were modest and that were relatively cheap compared to the kind of places I'd stayed in when I was in business. A few dollars a night, hostels and things. I was living very modestly and eating very basic but healthy food and stuff like that, and not acquiring and collecting lots of stuff on the journey. So these were my guiding principles.
No, I think they're beautiful principles, and I think so smart, and what a way to kick off a journey and just give yourself some guardrails where you can feel safe and also just feel a little bit stable. I imagine you must have felt quite untethered getting rid of these ties. And that's something I loved in your book. You talk about, your book is called Life Without a Tie. And initially you think it's like, because you're not a businessman anymore, you're not wearing a tie. But you actually talk about the 4 ties that we all have. Can you give me a little bit more about those and, how those were removed from your own life?
Yeah, I mean, it occurred to me that, if you put the old-fashioned tents used to have 4 pegs, one in each corner. And those 4 tent pegs of life are, you've got your relationship with your partner, your spouse. That's one of the 4. You've got your relationship with your career. That's the second. You've got your actual house that you bought and live in. That's third. And the 4th one is your family and friends and community of friends, because every major decision is made in reference to those 4 things. Does it work for my relationship, my career, my home, and my friends? If it works for all those things, it works. But it's usually one of those that comes to challenge you on a decision, or sometimes 2, depending on how out of alignment with your life it is. But I had this weird, bizarre series of events that meant all 4 of my corners got cut in one go. Obviously people get made redundant from their job. So suddenly one of the 4 is wobbling around, but the others are all in place until they replace that. Or a relationship comes to an end, but the job and the house and everything's sound, so they have to fix that one. Sometimes 2 things at the same time. That's pretty hard. But all 4 at the same time, you're just kind of lost in the grieving process without any idea of where to land your feet on the ground. It's quite difficult.
It's a reckoning of sorts, but I imagine it's almost like you sped up the process of really discovering who you were beneath this identity that you built for yourself, because we all do it. We all attach ourselves to these things and then kind of think that we are those things. We are our title. Yes. We are a partner. But then who are we when those things are removed? And you had them all removed in one fell swoop, and you really had to ask those big questions. And that was something that stood out to me throughout your book was, I think, the role that like spirituality and mindfulness played. I'd love to talk about that a little bit because I think you really went deep and took a spiritual approach to this journey.
Yes.
And I love that you brought up how all these coincidences kept happening and you were like being guided throughout your journey. And I think, man, that happens all the time. And I think it's so easy to dismiss. But when all those ties and distractions are removed, I think your eyes were wide open so you could actually see the guidance that was being provided to you. And I'd love to hear a little bit more about that. And then also something you talked about, which I thought was beautiful, were these confirmation signals and how you knew you were on the right track. So tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's the confirmation signals. I stole that from my days as a pilot. That's where it came from. When I was taught to fly aeroplanes, I was shown how to navigate to a place 100 miles away on the ground using an instrument in the cockpit called a VOR. And this was an electromagnetic device that when you put a certain radio frequency into the dial, for the beacon in the place you were flying to, which had a unique frequency. It could only be that one. The needle would start pointing towards that beacon and you would fly the aircraft in the direction of the needle. So the main thing you had to check was, did I pick the right beacon? Because you could be flying the needle exactly, but if it's to the wrong one, you're going in the wrong direction. And so to get a confirmation signal, you had to press this button on your control stick. And then you got a sort of audio signal in your ear, like a Morse code signal going, and that signal was unique to that beacon. So you knew if you heard that signal, it confirmed you were going in the right direction. So conceptually, that made sense to me. And in practice, it made sense to me as a pilot. I thought, I need some confirmation signals that I'm making the right choices on the ground as I'm traveling and doing this stuff. So, for example, when I got offered a part in the play, when the offer came through, I was already back it was in Australia, but I'd already returned to England. And I did that because I now had the costs of my life in London without my wife and partner. And so I had massive thousands of dollars a month in mortgage costs and rent costs and other things, and no real income to pay for them. And so I had committed to helping about 4 different clients with coaching, consulting work to kind of scrabble the money together to pay for this life. But when the audition happened and I got offered the leading part, I had this really feeling deep, deep, deep in my gut that this is what I had to do. I knew I was being offered a one-time only chance in life and I needed to take it. But I thought, how do I know this is the right decision? How do I know? And I suddenly thought, I know. I'm going to speak to each of the 4 clients that I've committed to working with now that I'm back. And I'll tell them this has happened. And I'll say, if you want me to stay and honor the commitment I've made to you, which I'm really willing to do because I had a reputation for having good integrity, I will do that. But if you give me your blessing to postpone for 3 months, I will go to Australia and do the play and I'll work with you when I come back. But it has to be with your full, honest blessing. Otherwise, I won't do it. I'll stay here. And I had that conversation 4 times for 4 people and they all said, yeah, I give you my blessing. If I was you, I would definitely go. And that was my confirmation signal because I knew it was the right thing then. I knew it was the right thing already, but with that, it was totally confirming it was right.
I love that. And you weren't an actor before this, right? You didn't have that.
No, I had some confidence because I had to do a lot of speaking publicly as a businessman at conferences and things like that. So I wasn't shy to be in front of an audience.
Yeah.
But my sister-in-law, my brother's wife, she's an actress, a professional actress. And so she gave me some good guidance and we looked at the script together and she showed me how I could work with it. And then I went to 3 months of rehearsals in Australia with learning the lines and working with the cast and the director. And they were very confident I could be helped to be the character. And I eventually was. Yeah, it was great.
I love this because you leaned into what your heart was pulling you to do, even though it didn't necessarily make sense on the outside.
It made no sense. It certainly made no sense financially at all. It was a disaster financially.
Yeah, but that led you to the next step in your journey, which led you to the next step in your journey. Yeah. And I think this is what life is. And this is something it's like a lesson I'm currently living right now where I know where I can feel it. Intuition is real. I feel it in my body. I feel it in my mind. I feel it in my soul. And sometimes my logical mind can't make sense of it. And it's like, I know I'm being pulled in this direction, but why? What's on the other side? And there is an element of just trusting yourself and trusting that God, the universe, whatever you feel comfortable saying, but that they've got you and you're going to be okay. And I love that you just said, you know what? I'm really excited about this. I'm jazzed about this performance. I want to be part of it. I'm just going to lean in and see where it takes me. And I think we would all be a little bit better for it if we all kind of followed suit there and leaned into the things where our heart is calling us and these passions and just finding joy too. And that was a big one for me personally after my divorce was reminding myself to find fun and joy. And that was something that stuck out to me in your journey too, because you did all these wild things. You like bungee jumped. I feel like you did all these crazy like adventure things in your 40s, no less. And I thought, wow, he really leaned into the joy. And I think sometimes it seems like that doesn't make sense to do, especially in a time of upheaval in your life. But I actually think that joy brings a lot of good energy and leads you into the right places.
Yeah, I certainly found that. I thought, I kept thinking, well, I don't know how long this is going to last or how long I'll be doing this. Or I thought I could just end up meeting somebody and starting a relationship and moving to where they live. And that would be the end of this journey. I had no idea really how it could play out. And so I thought, what do I really want to do while I've got the space and the time to do it? Well, one of the things I really wanted to do was make a contribution, because that's one of my 10 guiding principles, to be contributing. And so that's why I started the fundraising, because I knew I could be contributing to the local communities I was in. And that was really joyful to do.
Yeah.
Plus, I learned how to run marathons. So I got really physically fit, and that served me well. Even today, I'm in much better health now than I was like 20 years ago, I think.
And how old were you when you ran your first marathon?
I was 49. I did the New York Marathon in November 2009.
How inspiring. How incredible. How did that feel?
Amazing. I've never run anything never run 100 meters before that. And I trained for it, and I had a really good coach. My coach, Matt Campbell, was someone I met on my travels. And I was telling him I was trying to think of an idea to raise money. I didn't know what to do. And he said, have you ever thought of running a marathon? Because he'd run 6. I said, no, I never thought of that. I said, tell me about it. And when he told me about it, my body started tingling with excitement. I so loved listening to it. I knew there was something in it, because I started to use my body as my instrument to feel these things and feel that intuition that you're talking about. I said to Matt, I'm going to ask you a weird question. I said, do you think I could run a marathon? And he looked at me and he said, well, you look quite fit. I mean, have you ever run before? I said, no, not at all. He said, well, look, I'll tell you what, I know why you're asking. I know about the charity you want to start. And he said, if you stay here for 6 months and live in Chiang Mai, where he lived, I will train you how to run a marathon. I'll show you everything you need to do. I'll put a program together. I'll coach you. I'll do it. I said, okay. So I shook his hands, and that was it. I just made the decision there and then. And suddenly I was committed for a year, because 6 months of training, but a year of fundraising, so. And then I went the next year, I took all the $15,000 that I raised. I went back to Nepal. I went to the north of Thailand for the elephant sanctuary and deployed the money. I had to stand and watch it get spent and used properly, because I had 300 donors from around the world. And I promised them, I gave them my word that every single cent would get deployed fully into the things. That I didn't take a penny. And I really wanted them to see that was true. So I watched and made sure it happened.
I imagine that must have been very healing in a bunch of different ways. One, conquering something that you probably thought you could never do. And you trained, you worked hard, and you accomplished it. And at the same time, giving back and kind of creating purpose for yourself too, contributing to society again.
Yeah.
That must have felt really good.
It was brilliant on all those levels. It really helped me live my values fully, because I have a value around love and integrity, those two things. And it helped me live those values and help me honor my guiding principle of contribution. Yeah. So for all those reasons, it was brilliant. Yeah. Plus, the New York Marathon is a pretty cool thing to do.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I have never run it. I'm part of a run club, but I recently went to it this year to cheer on some of my fellow run club members. And it's just such an incredible experience. The energy, even as a spectator, is just so amazing. So I can't even imagine being in it and accomplishing something like that. But I wanted to go back to a part of your book in the beginning you had mentioned, and I think it was a piece of advice that you had been given, where you were told, when you don't know how to help yourself, help others, and then kind of the next steps will reveal themselves. And that just came to my mind as you were talking about giving back and raising money. And I think what a beautiful concept that is. It
is. There's a guy called Robert who was a mentor for me in my earlier career. He'd said, so you do hit times in life when you've got bleak outlook, you're in despair, you can't see a way out, it's dark, And William Bridges talks about this in his book about transitions, which is one of the books I referenced a lot in my journey. Because he says, when you have an ending in your life, you know that at some point a new beginning is coming. But there's a phase in the middle which no one really acknowledges. He calls it the neutral zone. The endings come, but the new beginning hasn't shown up. So for a while, you're in this neutral zone where the rules of life are totally different for a while, temporary. And he has a checklist of things, which I put in the book, that you can do. Don't make any decisions that you don't need to. Don't act for action's sake. Look after yourself in little ways. Take care of certain things like that. And you just wait for the neutral zone to ride out. But it's like the chrysalis period, when a butterfly comes out of the chrysalis, having been a caterpillar. The cocoon is where the transformation happens, but from the outside you can't see anything. It's completely motionless and you don't see anything. You just see this thing for 6 weeks or however long it is hanging in a tree, and then eventually a butterfly comes out. And you think nothing's happened, but there's a lot going on the inside you can't see. And that's what the neutral zone is like.
I love that. I just talked about this in another episode I just released with one of my guests. And it's such an important chapter. It's a liminal chapter, but it's also like a really, it can be disconcerting. I've been in it myself, and I'm sure it's not just a one-time thing, because we go through different evolutions and iterations throughout our lives and our journeys. And I think that's a tough chapter, because you're like, you almost feel a little bit stagnant because you're not, don't have any forward motion. But I think it's important just to trust the process. So I love that you just brought that up.
Yeah. I'm not sure if I answered your question, because it's inspired me to talk about it. But the question was not probably answered directly. But I'm happy to have another go.
Yeah, no. That was a great response. Something else that stood out to me in your book, and I wanted to ask you about, is this quest for love that you were on. So it reminded me a little bit of my own journey post-divorce, where I kind of had this mindset of, I just chose the wrong partner. And if I just find the right person, I'll be complete and everything's going to be okay. And initially when I first embarked on my life as a single person, I was just out there looking for somebody else to complete me. And it kind of took me a while to get in the mindset of like, no, you're complete on your own. And yes, love is great. And I still desire partnership, but my mindset shifted a lot on it. And I would love to talk to you about yours too, because it seemed like you were very similar, where you're just like, I just want to find love. Yeah,
of course. I mean, you've got to organize somehow your life around some principle or some focus point. And when you're on your own traveling, you're just naturally meeting so many people. It's hard not to connect, with certain types of energy or certain people you feel an attraction towards, and of course conversations naturally start. And so I did encounter a few people that I met and I traveled with and sort of linked up with for a while, and wondered with some of those if they could develop into something deeper, But I think I was doing that with more understanding and insight, like you're saying, that there isn't, that whole idea, I'll be happy when, is the concept. And the whole idea is that you're deferring your happiness to some point in the future when something external arrives. And Michael Neal, in his book, calls that an outside-in way of living. He said that's not a good way to live, because your happiness is totally dependent on what happens on the outside, in the outside world. And if someone says no when you wanted them to say yes, your happiness is not there. Or if you don't get the pay rise, your happiness is not there. But he said, if you flip that and you can live in an inside-out experience of life, you can choose happiness, and then you're exuding that happiness from the inside out, then you're more likely to pull towards you energetically what it is that you need. And I can confirm that's true for me. I just worked with that as an experiment for about 15 years, and I know it's true. I can give you hundreds of stories where that is exactly what happened. It's very powerful. I mean, honestly, when I tell some of the stories that I encountered, people's jaws are dropping. I'm happy to share one or two if we've got time.
Absolutely.
I mean, the one in the book that really stands out for me was when I remember being in Australia in 2010 at Christmas at my friend's house, and just looking on Facebook, and there was a picture on Facebook that a friend of mine called Felicity had posted, who lived in Chiang Mai, where I was staying at the time. And in that picture, there was about 7 or 8 people in a group, all looking happy. But there was a woman in the picture. I thought, wow, who's that? She's really attractive. I don't know her. But, on Facebook, it's terrible, isn't it? You can hover over the person, you can see their name, and you can click into their profile, and you can go and have a look, and you can see who their friends are and everything. You get a picture of that person's life, even if you don't know them at all. But it was at a time where I'd really had evolved my mindfulness practice. I was really learning to follow intuition and guidance. I was really asking the universe to collaborate with me on the things that I wanted to manifest. And so I sat and closed my eyes at their dining room table after seeing that picture, and I said, dear universe, help me with this. I would really like, when I get back to Chiang Mai, I'd like to bump into her, but I'd like to have it be really easy and effortless. I don't want to in any way manipulate anyone to make it happen. I just want to accidentally bump into her and have it be effortless. And I sort of opened my eyes. I thought, that's it. That's done. It may or may not happen. Honestly, within 48 hours of that, I'd totally forgotten about it. I got on with life. I was back in Chiang Mai, about a month later. And then it was about a month after that, I was getting on with my life. And I used to go running at the track quite a lot of mornings for my training. Mm-hmm. And I'd always go and have breakfast after I finished my run because I needed the protein and stuff like that. And I usually went to this place called Blue Diamond for breakfast every day. That was my routine. But as I left the track on this particular day, I just thought, you know what? I'm going to go to a nice kitchen for a change. I like that place, but I hardly ever go there. Just fancy a change. I'm going to go there. And I got in there and I ordered my breakfast, and they had the Bangkok Post, the newspaper. So I got the paper and I was just sitting, eating my wraps, reading my paper, totally on my own, carefree, let's say. And two people walked in and sat at the table next to me, and one of them was her.
What?
This woman. Yeah, I couldn't believe it. I could not.
Confirmation signal.
She sat at the next table.
So did you make your move?
No, then I thought, I don't want to spoil. This story's in the book, so I don't want to spoil it. I want to do it. But yeah, and I won't spoil what happened there, but we eventually did actually have a relationship for a year and a half. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Isn't it beautiful? I am a big believer that ask for things. When prayer is powerful, intention is powerful, and you put it out there, and sometimes it doesn't always come back the way you expect it. So I've heard the expression, if you ask for flowers, don't be surprised if you get rain, Yeah,
but be careful what you wish for.
Sometimes I ask, I'm like, in the gentlest way possible, But it is a beautiful thing, and I've had that happen to me time and time again. So I'm very big on setting those intentions. And that's such a juicy example. I love
there's no ways
one.
If a mathematician worked out the probability of that happening in such a big place, it's on a particular day like that.
Yes.
And that timing, if I'd been a half an hour earlier or half an hour later, it wouldn't have happened.
Yeah.
And totally random.
Yeah. And I love to, just because, you said the relationship was like a year and a half. I think not all of the people we cross paths with are meant to be in our lives forever. And I think that every friendship, and especially our romantic partnerships, those are teachers. And I think sometimes they're here to teach us lessons. I think about the people I've crossed paths with in my journey so far, and I think sometimes they're a mirror to me to show me almost like the parts of myself that still need healing. I've learned something from every partner I've had so far, and I'm just so grateful. And even though I don't particularly love heartbreak, it's not a feeling I like to experience regularly. Yeah. I think every heartbreak I've had has taught me something so powerful and has healed me in some way. So
yeah, got you. Yeah, I'm the same. Yeah, and I think I touched on that in the book, because I said I started to think of putting in my mind people into, is this relationship for a reason, a season, or a lifetime?
Exactly.
And touched into those, because I think everyone falls into one of those.
Absolutely.
And you don't need to know when you meet them which one it is, because it becomes obvious.
I know, that's where it's like letting go of control and the whole non-attachment approach.
Yeah.
I have to constantly work on that, because I'm always like in my head, especially when I'm dating, like, could he be it? Like, is he? And I have to just let go and just like be here for the experience. And I think that's so much of what your journey was. You really just leaned into this experience, not knowing what the next step. And, you spent 14 years just on this journey. And I think it's really incredible and a testament to what can happen when you let go of control, like the kind of growth, the kind of self-discovery and exploration that can occur when you just let go a little bit.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So Ray, tell me, you went on this incredible journey. Where are you today? Are any of those ties back in your life? Like, what does Ray today look like?
Yeah. So in August of 2023, I bought a house in the UK because I've got to the end of the road with living in temporary accommodations. And I really felt genuinely ready and a desire to have a place of my own again. Because I sold my house in London in 2005. So for 18 years, I lived temporarily, and now I wanted to have a bit more security and permanence. Bizarrely, within 2 weeks of agreeing to buy that house, I then met somebody who lives in a completely different part of the country. So I'm not actually in my house very much, weirdly enough, but I still have it, and it's there, and it's mine, and it's my place. And so that was a big change. I had to acknowledge I was ready to make that tie. But it's a very loose tie. It doesn't feel as concrete as when I had the house when I was married. It has a different feel to it, honestly. I'd be happy to sell the house. I'm not attached to owning it. but I definitely recognized that I needed a place that I could call home. So that was one acknowledgement. And then the second one is I'm in a relationship for nearly 2 years, so that I love being in. I love my partner, and I have no desire to be traveling away or anything like that. I just love the life that we have and the life that we are building together, and it's lovely.
It's beautiful.
That's a tie that I'm very, very happy to have in my heart. I did some work during the journey. I don't know how far you've got in the book, but I did this process called the Hoffman process. It's an 8-day intensive, and I was invited to come up with a vision for life, and I shared my actual vision that I came up with in that process in the book. And so I'm working to manifest that vision in real time now, and it's happening. So it took me 15 years after doing that work to manifest some of it, but sometimes things take a long time.
They do. This is the process. I think sometimes we expect when we are on our spiritual journeys that suddenly, because we're on our path, that it's all just going to fall into place quickly and without challenges, and that's not the case.
I think it's true in many aspects of life, because I've just finished applying for a professional accreditation as a leadership coach, and in that I had to write this 3,000-word paper about my philosophy as a coach and how I see things and where I've got those beliefs from, etc., etc. And I realized that in the early days when I was first ever coaching, I put myself under a lot of pressure to perform as a coach. Like, if you've got a client, if they didn't get results in one go, you think, oh, I'm not good enough. I'm not good enough. I'm not helping this person improve. But over time, I realized that people have a sort of period where they need to integrate, reflect. They might not take action for a while. Like, I did a writer's workshop when I started to get the message from the universe I needed to write a book about this journey, because I didn't have the intention of writing a book when I left, but people kept asking me, was I ever going to write a book about it? And I said, no, I just laughed it off. But I realized that I was kept asking that. So I went on a workshop to learn how to write a book, 5 days, and it was quite expensive. But I didn't start actually writing the book until 4 years after that workshop. So it took me time to kind of get ready. And so the same with clients. I get messages from clients I've coached, sometimes 2 or 3 years after we've finished our coaching, saying, I just wanted to let you know that I've got a new job and I've done this, and I've got one call today with somebody. I'm going to move to Australia and live my dream thanks to the sessions we had 2 or 3 years ago. I've managed to manifest.
Wow. That must feel really good.
So, so there is often a big time lag in these things. And that's okay, because we all need to take however much time we need to be ready. You don't want to go too soon if you're not ready.
Exactly. No, I think that's such a great point. So, Ray, I'd like to close with one question for you. So you wrote this incredible book, and there's so many insightful nuggets and lessons in here. If there's one overarching message you would like people to walk away from your story with, what would that be?
Definitely. Find your own true path. Do not live the life that others expect of you. Live the life that's true for you. And that might be meaning you've got to do some reflecting and digging and sort of self-examination to really understand what that life is. But as long as it lines well with your values and it gives you a vision for life that excites you and instills empowering beliefs that motivate you and gives you the feeling that you're living in your element, as Sir Ken Robinson calls it, where what you're naturally good at and what you really care about in the world, where these two things collide, if you can find some way of bringing those together in your working endeavors, then you've got the chance of having quite an extraordinary life. And you don't have to. You can have a mundane life if you want that. So it's a pure choice. But I think, my encouragement to everyone would be, life can be quite fascinating if you allow yourself to go in the direction of what your true path is, and prosperous as well. I've always had enough. I don't have anywhere near as much financial resource perhaps when I was a CEO, and I had a huge salary then and things like that. But honestly, I have enough for what I want to do, and I'm happier than I've ever been. I own nothing, and I'm way happier. So
such a powerful message.
Yeah.
Well, Ray, how can people find out more about you and your book? Where can they find information?
Well, the easiest place is a website called lifewithoutatie.com. And that's a great site because it's got a lot of pictures from the journey of the 14 years, which wasn't there when I put the site up originally, but a lot of readers said, have you got any photos of this journey? So I got the web designers to put a whole bunch of photos up from different phases of the journey. So that's where a lot of people, you can reach me there. Some people want signed copies of the book. You can order one there.
Oh, awesome. It's great. And for anybody who's interested in reading the book, I highly recommend it. I love how you write the book too, in that it's a memoir and you share your story, but it's also like a little bit of coaching comes through here too, because you do ask the reader a lot of questions like, hey, have you thought about this in your own life? And how does this apply to your own life? So it's both hearing your story, but forcing you to reflect on your own life as well. And I think it's just really beautifully written.
Yeah, brilliant. And there's also my 6 rules for happiness, which my editors encouraged me to come up with when I wrote the book.
I love those.
If people want some rules on how to be happy, there are some suggestions. They're only my rules. They're not the world's rules, but I think a lot of them apply to people I've spoken to for sure.
That's incredible. Well, Ray, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to come on and share your powerful story. And I think that your life and your story is just a reminder to us that we're allowed to evolve. We are allowed to go off script, and it may be completely daunting at times, but I think, there's some beauty in letting go. And I think sometimes the magic is in letting go and allowing life to take you where you're meant to be. So thank you so much for reminding us of that today.
Oh, my pleasure. What a joy to be in this conversation with you. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Ray. Nothing but the best. Thanks for listening to The Great Detour. If you're enjoying the show, I'd love if you could leave a rating or review wherever you listen to podcasts. It really does help the show have a greater impact. Also, don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Have your own detour story? You can share it with me by visiting thegreatdetour.com or The Great Detour on Instagram. Thanks for taking this journey with me.